Welcome back to A Writer's Mind. I did want to give an update on the karmic side of things, because I did get chapter 1 completed and I have a teeny bit of chapter 2, but I do have in my head where chapter 2 is going to go, so that's helpful. So with Karmic, which I still, I don't have a name for either of these projects, so I'm just calling this Karmic Book 1 for the time being. And I talked about a little bit how I really had to rethink this character. And I decided to pretty much scrap everything that I had with her and just kind of start over as far as personality. And I've kind of surprised myself because as I started jumping into this first chapter, the character is right away really different. And I think part of that is because before I actually started writing chapter 1, I really took some time to think about like her overall progression as a character and where she's going to have some challenges moving forward and where she's at when we start chapter 1. And so some of the backstory that I came up with for her, I had already had in place, and I'm going to keep that she has this really strained relationship with her direct supervisor, Cal. And some of that is going to be for really petty reasons, basically. And I'll get into that a little bit more kind of as I delve into him and his story a bit. But I also wanted to bring in not just that she kind of ended up being put in Cal's kind of pool of investigators that he's in charge of, but that she'd had an issue earlier in her career, that even though she's very good and overall everybody has always been like really pleased with her work, she kind of got thrown this super difficult case that like really she couldn't have won. It was just too late to really do anything. And so the person that she was supposed to investigate and stop, she wasn't able to stop. And so there's a lot of like negative fallout from that. And I'm debating whether I want that to be a real historical event or if it's going to be something that I make up. I'm still kind of playing around with a couple of different ideas there, and we'll kind of see where I go with that. So at the starting point for chapter 1, she is disillusioned with her work on some level because she feels like she is being punished for something that she really didn't have much control over. They brought her into the situation too late, but yet she kind of ended up in the public eye in the karmic world as just this failure. And even though some of her like supervisors didn't really blame her, because of public opinion, she's, kind of demoted and she's relegated to these smaller, kind of crappier cases to appease the public, basically. So she is still upset about that. And I think that this is going to be like several hundred years in the past that this happened, because the karmic sense of time is much different than human sense of time because these beings last much longer. They don't have, the same physical existence that humans do. So like this is in the recent past, even though I think what I'm going to plan is that it's been a couple of hundred years since this major falling out that she had with this bad case. It's recent, but it's still long enough that she's getting real irritated that they're still punishing her for this. And having Cal as a supervisor is just, that really nasty cherry on top of her, like, being pretty close to losing it. So immediately as I had like kind of played that out in my mind when I started writing her, she's a much more, not like negative character, but I think her frustration comes through and she doesn't have some of the softness that I had originally written her with the first version of the two books combined. She'd had this, deeper compassion for people, especially in dealing with the children in the story, the younger siblings. She had this idea of needing to make sure that they're okay, even though that's not part of what her job was in that version. But in this setting, part of where I start comes from my husband did a career day talk at an elementary school in the fall, and he had a blast doing it. He had a lot of fun. But it was kind of one of those things where I was like, that's fun for people who like kids and who have kind of an upbeat, humorous, way of talking to kids. Like those are really great presentations and the kids have a lot of fun. But if you bring in someone who is not happy in what they're doing and doesn't particularly like kids and is frustrated with this whole process, that's not going to go so well. It's going to be a much different experience. So I drop Beatrix into a career day presentation with fourth graders. And to make this opening kind of even more funny, I've limited the information that these investigators go into the world with. So instead of having in the original version, there's kind of like a pre-investigation where they would look into the person and find their routines and know what was going on and all of that sort of stuff. Where in this one, I've decided that their ability to interact is limited in some ways than what I had before, but more open in others. So Beatrix is not going to be limited to one person the entire time. She'll be able to hop between bodies so that if she determines that the person that she's currently in, she's gotten all the information she can move on to someone else and kind of work her way closer to someone who's either involved or causing the problem or who can give her more information. But I am limiting as far as the world rules. They're not going to be able to directly interact with the human world until an investigator is in a human body. So there's no pre-investigation. There's just their monitoring systems that they have in the karmic world that tracks and locates these disturbances. And once they kind of get to a certain point, that's when they'll kind of home in on that. And then they have some limited observational data, like they can kind of determine where it's at and the group of people who might be involved or who are closest to the disturbance. So Cal basically makes a point of calling in Beatrix at the most inconvenient, obnoxious times possible and putting her in a person who is, in his view, the least helpful possible. Because, he's a petty a-hole, and this is how he gets some revenge on her. So Cal brings her in very quickly and is like, you've got to go now. We're going to transfer you between the worlds. Doesn't really tell her what's going on and drops her into this woman who is there in the fourth grade classroom to give a career day presentation. But as Beatrix is dropped into the body is, obviously this is like physically stunning for a person to just have, another entity suddenly shoved into it. So the human bodies are basically kind of temporarily paralyzed while the investigator's material, essence, however we want to put it, soul, is crammed into the body. And then as the spirit is acclimating to the human body, Beatrix is kind of accessing her memories, her thoughts. She's kind of filling out the human body and getting a sense of like what's going on. And so she only gets like bits and pieces. And so she's dropped into this body with these fourth graders, and she has no idea what's going on. And she can't immediately get the body to like respond and do anything. So she's just kind of stuck standing there mute in front of this classroom of kids for a while. And the kids start going like, what the heck is going on? And she slowly, like piece by piece, realizes what's happening and why she's there. And she's not a kid person. She thinks they're gross. She thinks they're dumb and annoying. And so she's instantly irritated that this is the situation that she's been put into, because obviously it was not an emergency that she show up right that second. And so she knows that Cal has done this to her on purpose, which just sours her mood even more. And she ends up kind of bumbling her way through this encounter. And she realizes at the time that the teacher who invited her is a friend of the human woman that she is kind of taking over her body. And he is just like, what the crap? Like, you're supposed to be better at this. Because normally the person that she has taken over, I gave her the name of Katie, is normally like very funny and engaged and enjoys kids. And so Beatrix comes off as the polar opposite. And he's just like, I don't know, like my friend is having a stroke or something. I have no clue what's going on. And so she ends up like upsetting all the kids with her talk because she realizes she's like a water treatment operator. And that is not something that kids would generally be interested in hearing about. And she explains it in like the worst way possible, gets kind of stuck talking about poop for a long time. And the kids are completely grossed out and upset. And so the whole thing just goes really, really terribly. But as she is starting to try to wrap this awful experience up, the body that she has taken over starts to come out of the shock and starts to wake up. And so that's another change that I've decided to make. And really because it didn't actually make sense in the original version that Beatrix would take over a body and tie up the consciousness, basically, of the person that she was inhabiting. Basically, that was kind of an author-created problem, because if Beatrix was coming in to investigate what was going on, well, the investigation would be over pretty quickly if she could just get into the person's mind and interact with them and be like, oh, okay, I just accessed your memories and I know everything that you did, so case solved, basically. And that would have been too easy, so I had created this idea of blocking her access to the person with, I had like a vague sense of like, oh, they could influence and manipulate the investigator, but that was a pretty weak reason to have that limitation. So I got rid of the limitation. It didn't really make sense, and it was just a problem that I created that then I couldn't fix later. It didn't make any sense. So I'm actually going to have now that after the shock wears off, the person that she's inhabiting can actually interact with her. And this first person that she's with, she's in Katie's body. Katie is a pretty adventurous person, so she, after her initial shock, is kind of game. This is a weird adventure, like totally crazy. But she goes along with it and she wants to help solve the mystery. So she's kind of having fun with it, even though her body is temporarily out of her control. And the way that I'm going to prevent this from, like, obviously, if this was happening all the time, then all the humans would know about the karmic world and all of that. So my thought is right now that after the karmic investigator leaves the human body, it kind of erases the memories of those interactions, because those memories are going to be tied to that karmic essence. And I may need to like think through the rules about that a little bit more to kind of clarify. But so far, that seems like that will, make sense within this world and prevent complications of like, well, everybody knows about this, so it's not a secret. So once the investigator leaves the human body, they'll forget that they even had this interaction. They'll just kind of maybe have some hazy memories of going through the different steps and whatever they were doing. And so there will be different characters who react differently to this. Some of them will not be helpful and will be angry. And others will be more like Katie, who are like, what a crazy thing, but okay, let's do it. And I'm kind of playing with the idea that there might be a human or two here and there who don't completely lose all of their memories and maybe recognize Beatrix at a later time. That could be something to play with in the future. I don't have anything specific at the moment, but it's something that I may come back to and play with a little bit. So where I kind of got through, she gets through this awful making children cry during her scrambled presentation about water treatment, and start chapter 2. And so chapter 2, Katie is coming back into consciousness, and so she and Beatrix will kind of need to have it out a little bit, where she offers some explanation and Katie decides she'll kind of be all in on this. And then basically at this point, she has to make contact with Cal and check in and kind of give that initial report. And we're going to bring in some of Katie's personality, where she's just going to, lay into Cal as well. She automatically doesn't like him and is like, you ruined my fun presentation with the kids. Now I look like a crazy person. So Katie will kind of, I wasn't intending to really like bring her in, but as I got toward the end of this chapter and I was kind of getting a sense of who Katie is supposed to be in contrast to Beatrix, it'll be fun to see the differences between the two and have her as a character. My one reservation is that Beatrix is likely, she's not going to be able to stay in Katie's body the entire time, because Katie is not actually going to have access to all the information. And once she leaves Katie, like she can't, it's not like she can just like, okay, I'm going to go be in, Jacob's head for a while, and then I'll come back and let you know, because Katie will forget everything, and then she'd have to go through that process again. So I think that's going to be an interesting challenge for me to have these side characters who are going to be, working with Beatrix while she's in their body or working against her at times if they're like mad about it. But then I'm going to have to just keep leaving those characters behind, which could be interesting in dealing with, because it's not the usual thing you would do when you're developing characters, is then just abandon them at a certain point of the story. So we'll see. I don't know. I might hang on to Katie a little bit longer, especially this being the first book and kind of easing readers into this world and how it works. So I might hold on to Katie a little bit longer than I would otherwise, just to kind of work with that and let readers have a consistent side character for some portion of the book before I move to the next person. Because I do want to keep the focus on Beatrix, and later as Cal comes into it, more on Cal and their kind of feud that they have going on. But it will be necessary to have these other side characters in briefly, and I still want them to be interesting, complex side characters to an appropriate level. But that will be a challenge that I'm not quite sure what to do with yet. But anyway, so I do have that one chapter done. I got a little bit sidetracked the last little bit. I'm on spring break as I'm recording this, and I had thought to get more writing done, but I kind of got sidetracked with a book on publishing that I was trying to get wrapped up and finished, and have had some complications with that. But as soon as I get that finished, my goal is to get some more work done on both the Karmic and the Not Karmic series and get that ready. So this one's a short one, but I did want to just give an update, and also to kind of spur me to get moving again and get some new writing done and not just revising and editing. So I will hopefully be back again soon, and thanks for listening. If you're interested in any of my other works, you can find me online at delcheriespinner.com. And thank you guys for listening. The music for the podcast is from Mon Plaisir, and I will be back soon with another episode.